So just to give you a bit of structure to this talk, when there will be one, Ralf is going to kick off with an introduction to Lean Startup, then I will go MVP in depth. Then I will carry on with certain approaches to mixing Lean Startup with design thinking, and Ralf will conclude with other approaches to mixing Lean Startup with design thinking. Have I ad-libbed enough?
Yeah.
Yo.
Great. Thanks. So
floor is yours.
So before I start, actually, I have to say it's really weird to be here today because we're doing Lean Startup Meetup since 2012. So we had like 4th anniversary, and one of the like really great success stories with a few impressing MVP cases is actually Freeletics. So we didn't make it to have Freeletics talk in our meetup about Lean Startup. Now we're at Freeletics talking about Lean Startup. So that's scary. Let's see how we do. So, question before we start: who has read about Lean Startup? Okay, who has done Lean Startup? Who has done Lean Startup in more than 5 projects? Very good. So, if you hated Lean Startup, don't worry, it's like burpees. If you start, it will be slow, it will be ugly, it won't be fun, it will hurt. Keep pushing, okay? So, let's talk Lean Startup. The one thing that we have in common kind of with the guys from Freeletics is our passion. So our passion actually is straightforward, and which is actually what Lean Startup is for, is to transform great ideas into successful businesses. Okay, that's the one challenge we're having. So here's what it's about. We have like 3 out of 4 startups. Did I do this, or was that the beamer? I never see that before. Okay, so 3 out of 4 startups fail because their product does not have customers. That was a report by the Startup Genome Project a few years ago. And that's something really strange, because that should be like the most simple thing. To consider that you need customers. Now, the reason behind it is that the life cycle of a company has basically 2 important phases. And that is number 1, search and validate a business model. That is something we're starting to learn in depth, and which has been before like kind of an alchemy session. So we had people being really good at that. There was little teaching about it. And what we've all learned pretty well is to scale business models. So to reduce costs, improve efficiency, and to, attack nearby markets that are similar to the ones we're already serving. And times were pretty easy because things were moving slow. Today we see that business models expire quicker and quicker, so we need to push into the left side of the life cycle. And there's a clear separation in between, which is called the product market fit. Who's heard that before? Product market fit. Okay, that's the one thing we're pushing for initially when we're a startup or a new business. Product market fit means we know who our customers are, we know how to reach them, we have a system to sell, and we generate sufficient revenue. It does not say we're best at low cost, it does not say we're best at efficiency per person, but the market side is set and we're expecting to be profitable. We don't need to be profitable at that point, but this means it's worth scaling. Okay, you scale earlier, you'll scale to fail in most cases. So Lean Startup actually has a clear purpose, and that is building successful businesses. So you'll know the business model canvas from Alexander Osterwalder. Basically, it shows you how a corporate can create value, deliver value to customers, and then capture the value to generate profits. And it's about building them from new ideas and evolving from existing status. So as we talk innovation, let's briefly reflect on, we had like 3 out of 4 startups fail. Now, what do you think is it with corporates? We don't have so much figures on corporate failure, right? Who's working for a corporate? come on, even the website from Freeletics said corporate for hiring, right? So who's working at the company that is kind of established? Okay, not so many. It's not a shame, it's cool, because that most cases it's a company actually earning money, okay? So it's good to be in a company. The thing is, corporates cannot really share their fails, okay? Just imagine you're considering to invest in a stock, and the company says, yeah, yay, the last 5 car models, we didn't get them profitable within 5 years. Would you buy their stock? Not so much. Or imagine you're looking for a new job. And they're saying, okay, the last kitchen machine we released, it was a disaster. Would you say, yay, they are learning, awesome, let's go there? Won't work out, right? So corporates tend not to so much speak about failure. Okay, except for little details that can be better and some improvements you can do. But actually, when you talk to, we had product managers and business developers here, I remember that. So when you speak to those people, you know, it's so hard, okay? It's not 3 out of 4 in startups or whatever quota in corporates failing because everyone's stupid, but it's really like one of the hardest things you can do. Otherwise, all of us would be Tesla, right? So it's difficult. And now, the thing is, even the ones who made it, we can look into how difficult it is. So I've brought a little puzzle of a unicorn, and you tell me whether you know what unicorn it is. Who's doing that? Oh, yeah, that was like, thanks for the puzzle, Ralf. So it's a food industry star, 30% annual growth, and revenue has outgrown 3 billion. You guessed it right. It's Nespresso. Now the thing is, since when do you know Nespresso? What's your oldest memory about Nespresso? Tell me. When have you seen it for the first time? Remember the situation? Tell me about the first time you've seen. That was like I should ask questions, Steffi, right? Tell me a story about the first time you've seen Nespresso. Do you remember? When did you meet Nespresso?
Ich habe gar kein Auto.
Oh, that was someone different, was it? So George Clooney, yeah. So some 2000 something. So guess it. How old is Nespresso?
30 or 40 years.
Yeah, that's it. So have you read it or do you already know
The
it?
documentation.
Okay, so actually, so Nespresso is from 1982, right? So if you do innovation, time and money helped a lot in the past. Okay? And again, it's not like they were stupid. Okay? So they're actually pretty clever because they made it. But the thing is, when they started in 1982, the business model was actually somewhat similar to where they are today. When you look at the business model today, you'll know about like those flagship stores, and you'll know about the direct sales, and you can only buy the machines in the electronic stores, but when you need the capsules, you need to buy them right from Nespresso and stuff. So that seems like the best business model ever, and you just need to execute on it, but the story is different. When they started in 1982, this actually was the business model. So they had that super duper smart, innovative coffee brewing process where they knew, hey, we're doing an espresso that's on par with like the best baristas in Italy, even as good as the what's it called? The ones at the big car parks.
Segafredo?
No, the ones right at the motorways.
Starbucks?
You get the best coffee in Italy. You get at the motorway stops, right? So they were part with that, and they were looking at the market, and they very clearly identified the problem. That was restaurants. So if you want to buy a coffee in a restaurant, an espresso at 6, what's going to happen? They're going to tell you, we're already cleaning the machine. I'm so sorry, right? And then you need that educated barista. So it was pretty clear. Hey, let's go for like the world. Because we have that little machine, you don't need a barista, it will be top quality, it's easy to clean. It's a no-brainer, right? It cannot fail. So when you dig into that story deeper, you'll find that they failed for years and years and years. And they got, they had like the first Black Zero in 1995. So it took them 13 years, and they were very reluctant to get away from the no-brainer. Okay? They didn't want to accept what they found in the market. They believed, hey, we just need to like replace a few guys, like replace the CEO, replace the product manager. You know that, right? Replace the people and things will work. Actually, you're trying something different, which is good, but it can be easier. So, to make you think of don't trust no-brainers, I've brought you a picture. That is Kangbashe. Who's heard about Kangbashe? It's actually a ghost town in China, and that was like, oh, that's bad to read, so I need to help you. Kangbashe was actually designed in the end of 2005 or something for a capacity of 300,000 people because they had found an amazing amount of resources, like coal and stuff and like rare earth stuff. And they built a really tall city because it was pretty clear this is like the next El Dorado. Everyone will go there. Everyone will be rich. Everyone will be fine there. It just will be great to live there. So they put up like this big city. And that was the population in 2012 was 5,000 instead of the expected 300,000. And this is like a Sunday afternoon when everyone's out having a party. Okay? So think about Kangbashe, and then you'll have a good picture for the saying, we built it and they didn't come. Okay? Because that's what happens if you trust no-brainers and you keep trusting them. So what can we learn from this guy? Always be testing. Okay? And here we are with Lean Startup. So the thing we do with Lean Startup is we take the one thing that we believe in and we start. Come on, I'm already switched. Do something. This is like the most amazing beamer ever. I'm loving it. You're my friend. So we pick the business model that we fall in love with. Big risk, by the way. And we pick the riskiest assumption, which does not mean the one that we believe is most unlikely, but the one, if it's wrong, it may kill us, or at least it will waste a lot of time and money. Okay, so look for the maximum impact you can have. And we take that riskiest assumption, and redefine it into a measurable goal. So we put something up where if we're right, we'll see something happen if we start a test, which is called the minimum viable product, which we, by the way, tend to call a minimum viable experiment to get your mind rid of the term product. Because most people think it's about building the product. Later in examples you see that's not the way it goes. But I'm not going to talk about MVP because Ben will. And just as a brief thing. So basically, you think about what's the biggest shit that can happen, and then you think, how can I quickest test it? Okay? And then you do build, measure, learn, and then the real problem comes up because it's not an autopilot. So after you've run the experiment, you need to look at the success and the fail of the experiment. But even if it fails or if it succeeds, you still have to do one really scary thing, and that is you should understand why it fails, and then you need to decide what's right or wrong. So it's not just like, well, I run that experiment and then it's going to modify the business model. No. You really need to understand what happened, why did things occur, and then you're going to adjust. So then you're going to say pivot or persevere. Okay? So pivot is, for my sports, basketball, it's that crazy move where you keep one foot on the ground, and you move the other one, and then you're able to place, to redirect, change the direction without totally losing your position. And that's kind of the metaphor. So instead of the past, like we're starting a project, if it does not work, let's throw everything away, let's start a new project, because a new project always has status green. You know? That's cool. Now, so we keep on with the project, but we try to find a way to adapt it to reality. That's the thing. Okay? It's about solving the puzzle. It's not about is it possible or is it not possible? It's about within your budget to find the way to succeed for your vision, like Freeletics did. Steffi earlier said, don't ask opinion. And she said, like, we're bad in prognosing the future. I'm going to show you how bad. If you ask opinions, just think about this. 4 out of 5 gym memberships go unused. So we humans really suck. We really suck at guessing what we will do in the future. All of us. Okay? We just don't notice. So keep that in mind when you're interviewing people. I'm not lying to you because they want to lie or just because they're nice. Because they just don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Okay? So people that sign up, I mean, they are aware it's a subscription. It's expensive. So they either have not thought about it, which is, I don't think, the case. But actually they are wrong about expecting their own behavior. Just think about all the stuff you've bought, you've got at home, and you never used. Okay? It's as easy as that. We cannot really look into our future. So, we're talking about behavior. And the question is, when you try to identify that riskiest assumption. So, my question would be, who's the critical decision maker for your whole business? It's not the founder, it's not the CEO, it's actually your customer. Okay? These guys, you can specify everything, you can design everything. These customers do not accept that you define what they should do. Okay? So you really need to find out who exactly is your customer and why the fuck should they care. So you need to find something within their behavior from the past that gives you an indication that your great new idea really has a chance to at all capture their attention. Okay? You need to know their problems to get any attention for your new idea. Now the second critical thing is, what will them convince to buy? So whatever you offer to them, it's not the product that you offer, it's the change to their life. Like Freeletics. I forgot your name. Freeletics guy in the beginning. Like you said, okay, you're not offering sports to them, but you're offering them the best version of themselves. That's the change, right? They are not mostly showing off how they do the practice, but they're showing off how they have changed. And if you looked into the faces, you see like people that really are a little bit fatigued, and then in the end, they are all smiling, they are all proud of themselves, and they have changed as a person, not only as a biological body. So, yeah, that's the one thing. This part actually we call customer development. So in the old world, it's called product development. You build a product and you sell it to like resilient customers. That's not true, because you don't need a product in the end, you need customers. So always start with your customers and understanding them. I'm badly running out of time. Okay, so I have 2 very quick cases, and today I noticed they are almost from the same time, which is scary for me, because I lose the comparison. So here's a Munich story. 2012, a project called Rapid Slides. Who tested Rapid Slides in 2012? Awesome. It was an online service that offered transforming handwritten sketches into completed PowerPoints. Okay? So you do a sketch, you send it, scan it, or send a picture, and then you get finished PowerPoint in return. Okay? That was a vision that came up when I was trying to plan the second Lean Startup Meetup. So my co-organizer at the time, Daniel Koller, I wanted to talk about him, hey, let's do this and that. And he said, okay, before we talk, here's my idea. And suddenly I was a co-founder. And I thought, wow, is that technically possible? I wasn't really sure. And then I noticed it doesn't matter. First, we need to find out whether there will be any customers for that. So the first thing I did was I posted on Xing. I had 800 Xing contacts at that time. So that was actually not friends and family. And I was just posting this like a very brief teaser for people to connect to me if they do one presentation at least per every 3 months. And I promised them that they get a test run if they are within the first 10 people replying, and ask them to do a direct message so that if 10 people had commented just here, the 11th person would have never come, right? So I told them, okay, come up with a direct message. So that test worked out really great. I was talking to like 50 to 60 people, and all our assumptions were totally confirmed. People had big problems just working through nights to get presentations done, and we're really looking for a way to get rid of that. So it was clear, okay, the problem exists, and we can move on. We did a few more experiments, but within like 3 weeks, we came up with a website. Actually, I lost the good screenshots, but here's a bad screenshot. And we were actually just starting to sell it, having built 0. So at the time we were advertising that, we were telling, okay, we're 80% finished, but in some of the cases we need to adjust afterwards a little bit. And because of that, we can only deliver within typically 8 to 12 hours and not 5 minutes. People were somehow buying into that, and were really sending us slides, and we were testing that, and so we could find out would they actually do it, and what would we actually need to build. That was the learning I got personally, because I thought, okay, we're going to find out will people use it, and then I found out, okay, we're actually finding out what it will do. So we found ourselves defining an algorithm that later should be done by a machine. So how do we transform handwritten sketches into PowerPoint? And we tried to scale that via ODisk, and actually within 3 months we found, okay, we shouldn't continue. Why is that? Because we learned people have a problem to come up with the right sketch. Okay? So people were always amazed by what they got in return compared to what they got as input, but they said, yeah, you know, it's shit in, shit out. Sorry. So they didn't come back, and we knew, okay, there's much to do. We came up with a few more ideas, had some visions how to pivot, all too expensive or too boring, like building a slide service agency. So we stopped that. But in 2012, roughly, another company started that did even more impressive experiments. These guys. Are you aware that Freeletics actually is one of the coolest lean startup stories we have in Germany? So there is a guy in Karlsruhe actually who wrote the first blog post on like behind the scenes. Jan König, so I'm adding a link. So this is, I forgot the name. What's his name? He's like the poster boy of Freeletics #1. Because when Freeletics started, the first thing they did this video. The video proved that the method does work. The method of actually transforming your body within 15 weeks. And they had this video put up to collect email addresses. Full stop. Okay? So what they did, they only used it to collect email addresses and then to send out a newsletter. And the newsletter, and this is a screenshot from Jan, from his email, and here's the link. I'll add it to the meetup comments later, okay? So that's really a great read. So Jan got this email, and the email just told you what to do and how to run your exercises. And you could actually just see how that works. And the next thing that happened was that they found, okay, people are actually trying to do that, but they are losing track because they are losing motivation. So what they did, they got in touch with their customers by setting up Facebook groups. Oh, okay, contrast not working. So they built customer communities. And they did that by setting up a few Freeletics groups. So if you today look into Freeletics and you search for groups on Facebook, you'll find like 1,000 groups worldwide. And that's of course the end result of it, but that's also how they seeded it. So building a community, they didn't really use an app to have those people do it and to connect, but they really built the community. They did customer development by connecting the people that responded to the initial trigger they had put up with the vision of themselves. Right? They saw the video, they wanted to do something, now they had the chance to connect. So by connecting, they could motivate themselves. And Freeletics guys could go out and learn what do we need to do for people to keep on pushing for themselves. Okay? So, with that done, the next thing they did from one day to the other, they decided, okay, let's earn money. One day to the other. So they put up an ugly shop. Well, kind of ugly. It's Shopify. It's pretty cool already. and they just sold these 3 books. And that was really the 15-week program, which you could buy for a few bucks, and it generated 500,000 euro for them, which changed everything. And after that, they came up building really the app that everyone knows. So that's like a bit cooler story than mine, but I like mine as well. So, so that's really like what can happen if you do it really at an excellent level and really hit like the perfect nerve. Now, we're almost finished, Ben. Sorry. So the other thing that I would like to tell you, now I've told you like, okay, this is startup. It also works for corporates. Okay, there's a few things to adjust, but the one thing I want to tell you is really that it's not only about the new business where you can use Lean Startup, but Lean Startup has something that every established company can use as well for their existing portfolio. So on the one hand, we had, like I said in the beginning, is it Beamer, is it me? Hello? It's about searching and validating business models and looking for a product market fit. But the other thing is, even if you don't go for new business, you can really do amazing things with that tool set, which actually first got my curiosity on Lean Startup, because I was looking at it and I was thinking, wow, I would have loved to have that as a product manager, just to systematically evolve products. And that is innovation accounting. And if you know Marty Kagan and the way he does product innovation, it perfectly suits for product discovery, also for new features and stuff. So if you want to look into that one, I'll be happy to talk later. Just wanted to mention it. So Benny said, Steffi said, we are having awesome speakers. So our speaker, let's go for Mr. Awesome Daniel here on MVP.
Okay, so there were a few of you who were at the Lean Startup meetup a couple of weeks ago. You might experience a certain feeling of déjà vu for the next 10 minutes. For the rest of you, let's take a closer look at the MVP. Consider the following scenario. It's late at night. The deadline is tomorrow. And your bug tracker is looking unhealthy. How can you deal with that problem? Well, of course, you just call it an MVP, you launch it, and you go to bed. Well, what about this? You want to build a really cool startup, but your ideas are questionable. How can you deal with that problem? Well, of course, you just launch an MVP, get feedback, and pivot your way to massive success, because ideas don't really matter, do they? I suspect you know where I'm going with this, which is that this is not how MVPs work. So how do they work, I hear you all asking? Basically, this was the process that Ralf introduced before, which is the basic Lean Startup loop. So build, measure, learn, and all the while you're validating assumptions with this. MVP is quite simply the build part of that loop, which gives us the following definition, which is the simplest next step you can take to test your assumptions. Now, the eagle-eyed amongst you might have noticed a discrepancy here, namely between talking about a product or a next step. And the product bit is perhaps what created the most confusion with the MVP, which is why you have situations like the ones I described at the beginning. Some people have therefore tried to rebrand it as the minimum viable experiment or the earliest testable product, but the problem is minimum viable product sounds much cooler. So we're stuck with it, but just don't make that mistake to think that it's a product in the sense that most people would envision. Now we're going to look at the most common types of MVPs, or the most important ones. The problem interview, solution validation, concierge / Wizard of Oz, prototype, and landing page. So problem interview, there the assumption you're validating is that the target group has the problem that you're trying to solve. This ties pretty well with Steffi's talk at the beginning. The techniques are the same. The important thing for me is generally when you think of an idea, it's essentially a problem-solution pair. And the problem is the most important bit, because if you build a bad solution to an existing problem, that's actually a salvageable situation. You just have to build a better solution. If you build the best solution ever to a problem that no one has, you're hosed. There's nothing you can do about that. So as an example from last year's Lean Startup Machine, this team wanted to do better baby food labeling. So they were concerned that parents were not aware that, what was actually going into the baby food. So they talked to some parents and tried to validate that assumption, and it turned out that parents of young babies have a lot of problems, but actually what's in that jar of food wasn't really one of them. Without going into too much detail, which actually I don't even need to because Steffi's talk pretty much covered all of this, but if you want to find out more about running customer interviews, I really recommend this book, The Mum Test. Easy read, good book. Read it. I'm getting the cool beamer too now. So now we have solution validation, also known as pitch MVP. So the assumption we're trying to validate here is that what you're offering will actually resonate with the target audience. In other words, they'll be interested in the value you're proposing. The point here is to essentially somehow demo what you're offering to see if there's interest. So as an example, this is a startup. They're working on a video game tracking glove. So if you've ever used the Kinect, you might know that it follows the hands and stuff, but the detail, it doesn't quite get it. So they're working on this cool glove that can track finger details and all that. And to test it, they took a pair of kitchen gloves. They drew electronic-y looking things on them with an edding. And then they made a video where this guy was pretending to play this video game and someone else was sitting back here actually playing the video game. But it really looked like he was controlling it. And then they went with that video on the streets, showed it to people, and they got a really good response.
Stop it, you'll be 10 slides on.
Yeah, that's kind of my concern. I'm actually one slide too far. There we go. Third one is Concierge Wizard of Oz. Now, I'm pretty happy with Ralf's talk here because that's one of the toughest ones to get through normally, but actually the two examples that he brought up are exactly what this thing is. What you're trying to validate is whether your solution will really solve the problem. So first, you checked whether the problem was there. Secondly, whether your pitch essentially resonated. And now thirdly, you're trying to deliver it without building the product, which was the case with Rapid Slides, with early Freeletics. And the example I have here is DoorDash, which is a startup currently valued at 600 million, I think. And they deliver stuff. And this was the original landing page, where they took menus as PDFs from all the local restaurants without telling them, stuck them on a web page, and checked if people would call. And people did call, and then they'd get the stuff from the restaurant, bring it to the people, and that's how they kickstarted their business. Prototype. This is basically the flip side of the previous two. So in this case, you're not so much trying to detect demand, but you're trying to see if the user experience of what you're trying to build is going to be as amazing as you think it is. I think I have to remember to click like 10 seconds in advance. So this is an example from Google Launchpad from a couple of weeks ago. This is a team, they're building a robot to deliver stuff in hotels is their current assumption. And we tested that by prototyping the robot delivery with a cardboard box and a few bits of paper. So the end user had a user interface with some paper where he could order and a smartphone with a photo of the menu. This was the robot, and the lady behind the bar had her own interface where the orders would come in. This took maybe an hour to put together and still delivered some really valuable insights. For example, what happens if the robot actually forgot to bring the sugar and left before you figure that out? Or the fact that the person behind the bar, instead of spending the day talking to people, all of a sudden just gets orders on a bit of paper and has to put them on a cardboard box or a robot. And she really didn't like that at all. So very simple tools, very interesting insights. Landing pages. This is perhaps the most well-known, common first port of call that most people have. The assumption there is that you can actually scale the demand. The problem with landing pages is that if you start with that and it fails, which is likely, you won't know why. You will only know that it happened. The second thing is that you need to be able to drive traffic at it, which is becoming increasingly difficult. So this is an example from a startup in the US. They make what appears to be an awesome shower. At least they've convinced me it's an awesome shower. I have no idea if it actually exists. The point is to make it feel real, and then you can test if people are actually clicking the pre-order button, leaving email addresses, and so on. An interesting tip there is that it's a pretty good place to recycle the pitch MVP, which, for example, the motion glove people, that's exactly what they did. They just took the video they produced a couple of slides ago, stuck it on a landing page, and they were cool. Now, as a bonus round, the minimal launchable product. So this is perhaps what most people think of when they think of MVP. In other words, a really stripped down version that you just launch. And the example I'm going to look at here is the Tesla Roadster. Now, I don't know how familiar you guys are with the history of Tesla, but essentially the Roadster was the MVP to the Model S, which itself is the MVP for the Model 3, which is what they were aiming at all along. That's the one that launched a couple of weeks ago and got 500,000 orders in already. What I've always wondered is, why did they make that? I mean, if you're making a mass market electric car, which was their goal, wouldn't this actually make more sense as a starting point? I mean, you're building something that people can buy who are perhaps in your market. The thing is that with the economies of scale of their first product, or rather the lack of economies of scale, and the amount of R&D they had to put in, the cost of that car was over $100,000. And it's also not a car you can transport your family around with, which means that it's a second car, and at that price point, your early adopter segment is quite literally George Clooney. And George Clooney, I can guarantee you, is not driving this piece of crap. The point I'm getting at here is to be very aware of who your early adopters are and what's important for them. And it might not actually match up who the end game target audience you have, because the end game target audience of Tesla is essentially me. And I'm not the same as George Clooney, unfortunately. So, God damn it, no. Okay. So, in summary, shitty products are not MVPs. MVPs are there to help you validate assumptions and be very aware of who your early adopters are. So that was the bit about MVPs. Now we're moving on to the final stretch of this design thinking lean marathon, which is what happens when you try and combine the two. I mean, we've seen what lean startup is, we've gone in depth with the experiments. How can we use the two together? What is actually happening when, I mean, is this computer working? Is the beamer waiting for something?
Large image to transfer via wireless takes some time.
Oh, is that what's going on? Jeez, this is a really dumb system. Shall I try it again? Okay, that's one too far. Okay, this should actually be a Venn diagram, but what we're discovering is that this beamer doesn't render light grey tones very well. So just assume there's another circle here and another one over there. So, before we say how we can merge them, it's useful to see where the overlaps and commonalities between the two methodologies are. The overlaps are, in my opinion, actually really big, and it's primarily, they're both human-centered approaches. In other words, they encourage you to talk to your users and build stuff and test stuff. There are, however, some differences. In Lean Startup, the assumption is you have an idea when you begin, and then you validate assumptions, and that's how you go into it. Lean Startup also has a go-to-market and growth strategy. By that I mean that it puts a lot of focus on the early adopters and how you actually get started and how you can grow from that initial niche. And Lean Startup has a wide array of experiments which we've looked at to validate all different aspects of the product and the business. Design thinking can have multiple starting points. You can also start with an idea, but you can start with a problem, for which you then come up with a solution. Or you can start up with essentially nothing, which sounds a bit weird, but actually, when we get a design brief, that's actually often what it is. It's essentially, we have this thing, we would like to make it better. And design thinking can help you find the best ideas to solve that. And it's also a problem-solving, where it has a problem-solving aspect to it, whereas Lean Startup primarily focuses on finding out what's wrong, and then you're kind of on your own to figure out how to deal with it. Oh, Jesus.
A slide a day.
So many information in pages.
It's not, because the problem appears to be that this thing needs to transmit all this data over there.
It's not this time. What's the slide resolution?
I don't know, normal?
4K.
Commercial.
It's a lean slide beamer.
Okay, I think I'll just anticipate what's going to come up and carry on talking, and hopefully the visuals will catch up at some point. The first way we merge Lean Startup with design thinking is in what we teach in our Startup Accelerator curriculum, which is dealing with the problem of pivoting. What can happen in Lean Startup if you imagine, you have to start imagining the slides now. If you imagine you have the build, measure, learn loop, the bit between learn and build again can be problematic. I mean, if things are essentially going okay, it's fine. But very often you will learn that things aren't working out the way you want. And in that situation, you are confronted with a... Are you doing anything exciting?
Yeah, I'm going to take you away the pointer, because I'm just thinking maybe it's a slide download from the web. You know? Oops.
Ah.
See? I'm not here.
But
Just keep talking.
It should be offline at this point.
Should be. Let's see.
Okay.
Just don't use it, yeah.
Okay, so that was actually the slide I was describing you 2 seconds ago. So if your learning is that things didn't quite work out the way you wanted, you do not have necessarily an obvious next build step. You might just find out that your idea didn't work out and tough. So what happens then? I fear this didn't help. No, doch, no, it was. Okay, so dealing with it, you have a meeting, of course. This can actually work. You can actually have productive meetings where people exchange a few ideas, come up with a good solution, and you move on. But very often, especially if the situation is difficult, you're going to have endless conversations. There'll be no clarity whatsoever. and this will heavily slow you down. And as you probably all know, moving slowly is really the death for any kind of innovative endeavor. And that's where design thinking can really enhance lean startup, by providing approaches where you creatively solve the problem as a team. As a process, it's a pretty simple introduction. We just add a design thinking ideate workshop between the learn and the build. And the toolkit that we use for this is pretty much the toolkit from the Google Design Sprint. So it's a combination of individual and group tools. The point of that is that often people come up with better ideas themselves, but then you still need to bring everyone together and, first of all, get all the ideas on the table, and secondly, come to some kind of decision fast and move on. So we use individual tools, we use mind maps and crazy eights, and group tools we use concept map, brainstorm, and dot voting. And back to you.
Excellent. We should have matched the talks, then you wouldn't think like it's 3 talks. But so first I have to underline this. So we've been doing this as a team now for quite some time, because like I said in the beginning, it's with Lean Startup, it's like burpees, right? It hurts and it sucks because if you do it the old way, innovation, it's pretty easy. You start building your product and your product gets more beautiful every day. It's fun, right? You see that you're actually achieving something. With Lean Startup it's different. You start testing, and the better you are, the faster you are, the more you're failing. Okay, the more you have to adjust and adapt, and the quicker it will be that you find a really difficult, tricky puzzle to solve, and you need to start loving that puzzle. But that's not how it begins. At first, it just hurts. Okay, so that's why really that approach to use design thinking to pivot better, that is really so helpful. Now, that's really the most important part that I see for mixing. The other thing is we often are called by companies and they are asking us to support their innovation effort. And our first question is, what's plan A? So what do you want to validate? What's your great innovation idea? And they have like pretty vague idea, or something that has been discussed on and on and on, and then we can do like some business model session. But basically it's not really getting into something precise, and often it's a little twist. Okay, so again, design thinking for the rescue. I mean, that's like the obvious, super obvious stuff. This one is already downloaded, so here's the proof. Okay, so use design thinking to find great new ideas, find something different, find something that really is far from traditional thinking. You'll find many of the components already within the people, so always involve the team at the company, but just add design thinking. So when we have these like 6 steps, the one thing that you could think is, okay, as Ben has told you, always start with customers and problems. You could say, okay, we only do design thinking up to this point, okay? Because a prototype and solution, we don't need that. We could think, this is weird, come on. It's only a slight change, my dear. Just show it. Thank you. So the prototype and test, that's actually what Lean Startup does, right? So shouldn't we just omit that? Should we not just drop it? I'm considering to give the answer instead of moving on here. Wow. So no, don't skip it. Just run the full process, because these 2 steps really help a lot to have a shared understanding. If people discuss on a business model canvas, that's not helpful. if they've really had to put something in front of the customer, remember mind learning from rapid slides, it really helps you to get a shared understanding of what it is all about and to really come to a different level of discussion. So do the full process, and then of course, don't trust those tests too much. Okay? Get some feedback, but it's not like really the final result that you're going to have. And also good news, my dear Beamer. So the good news is do more than one result. So do it often, do it frequently, and create ideas. Create an idea factory actually, because picking a start is difficult. So if you've been in corporates, you found that a company really takes some time to be brave enough to start an innovation effort. This is fun. I think the Beamer is running an experiment on me. Okay. Yes. So come up with a few ideas, because you'll need some to actually rank them and come up with a choice. So take them and transform them into business models, because business models is what you're actually will be worth investing into. If you're a startup, you can go different. You can say like, okay, I'm only looking for a problem in the customer group, and if the problem is big enough, I'll find a way to come up with a solution. For corporates, that often is the most ridiculous idea ever. Okay, if you find corporates that want to do it, cool, but usually not so much. So come up with business models. They trust them much more, because they already, at least is an idea how to earn money. And there's one thing that you can do once that you have a business model that you cannot do with a simple prototype, and that is what we call hardening. So if you're from technology, you know that hardening means making something safer from breaking. Like if you have a server, you're hardening it, it's more difficult to hack it. And actually, that means you're really just using a lot of best practices, like you're looking for customer lock-in, you're looking for recurring revenues and all that stuff, and you're really tweaking and hardening that business model so it gets more potential. Okay? So when doing that, and you have a few ideas, and you can potentially create even more business models after that, then you really can go for ranking. And ranking is what you need to actually get buying in a corporate. Okay, you need a set of options, because if one is better than the other, it's likelier you're going to start it all. Sounds good, does it? But that's the way it is. So that's the perfect addition for adding design thinking in the beginning. So for me, it's like, I think that Alex Osterwalder once came up with the idea that the startup team needs to consist at least of 3 people, hipster, hacker, and hustler. Okay, so the tech are not yet in here, but for me personally, I'm a lean startup guy. I'm very happy to be working with the design thinking guy whenever there's like a new innovation game. Well, we just told you why, okay? I feel like business, and when Ben is around, I know design thinking is around as well, when Steffi is around as well, so that's a good starting point. So try to have both of the skills within your teams when you run innovations, and here are 2 ideas for how to combine them. Now you can come back in front if you'd like to, because basically that's what we had to tell, and we'll be sticking around some more, but first we'd love to invite you within the next few hours after the picture has been transferred to the Beamer. We'd love to invite you to our next Lean Startup Meetup, which is on 25th. Yep. Save the date is already out there. We also have an awesome speaker, but we're kind of always like last minute announcement. So we'd be very happy to have you at Werk 1. It's the Wednesday before public holiday, so you can have tons of beer afterwards with us and ask all the questions that you were not able to ask tonight. But apart from that, connect us. Let's have a beer, let's have some talks, and we're ready for questions, are we?
Yeah.
Yeah.